How do you go from sounding like this to this? I'm going to show you some of it today. We're going to sort of talk about automation and ducking and how to create space, rhythm, tension across your mix, all across the spectrum. Let's just first isolate, I think, the kick and the bass. I think that's a good idea. So here is kick. Pretty straightforward, right? And then it looks like the bass is a low and a high. Right, and there's not a lot of movement. It's just kind of straightforward, right? Right, and you can see here, there's a sub bass on the 2, 3, and 4, and here's the high, taking up a lot of space between the two of them, right? Especially along with the kick. You know, it's okay, but what we need to do is create a little space. So one of the first things you can do is you can use something like a Pro Q3 or 4, and we'll put that on the end here. I'm going to turn these off and just use the bass line. Really simple. You can see if I open up Serum, it's just a low octave single sub with a little bit of cutoff modulation. That's it, really, right? So what you can do, though, to get it to sit around the kick, if we, this is one thing I really love about Pro Q4. If you set it to sidechain here and you have the input to be the kick will show up in the spectralizer here. So it's really helpful. You can see right between the two where they collide, right? So this is sub. So there's two ways we can do it. If we want to keep the sub of the kick, right, the low end of the kick, you'll want to be careful of both of them colliding, right? So what I would do in this case would be taking actually this sub low and bass line, because it is a bass line, it's not necessarily a sub bass, although it does add rumble, is maybe just take it and shelve it just a bit, right? Maybe up to like 60 or 70 hertz. We'll back it off just a bit, right? But then what I'll do is, now that I've set that side chain, is I will use this point on the EQ and kind of find that nuanced transition, right? And right where the kick hits. So you can see probably right around there. I think it's a G. Yeah, it's G, if I'm not mistaken. And this knob here is what I would kind of call the depth. And in order to activate the sidechain, right now you see it's just ducking around itself. If you activate it, you can see it starts to duck around that spot, and you can adjust the attack on it and the release, just to give it a little more movement. So I'm going to turn it up just a little bit so you can hear a little more. Right, so now it's got a little movement, and then this is the sort of threshold, how aggressively it's going to start, like when it's going to start to activate. Let's put it right about there. All right. So sometimes what you can even do is while you have that, I sometimes even use an LFO tool as well, along with it, to kind of add a second ducking. Right, so you can hear it's pretty aggressive now. So why don't we leave it like that, particularly for the lesson, so that we can actually hear it and see it, right? So now what we want to do is we want to take the high end, we'll solo out the high end, and we need to do something similar, because with this kick, there's no space. So I would do a similar thing where we would take an EQ. It looks like I already did it here, but I'm going to do a fresh one just so we don't, get confused with what I already have. We'll do this high end, right? This is a high bass, so we really don't need that much of it, right? But what I do is add the sidechain again on it, and then activate it again, the depth a little bit, right? And then turn it actually on, give it a little bit of an attack, a little bit of a release, so it's quick to activate, but a little slow to actually release. And we'll just turn the threshold a little bit here, right? But then what you can do is if you go deeper, like this and then slide it up. Right around there, and now I'm gonna mute it. Hear how much difference? And just as before, what I'm gonna do is actually add an LFO on it as well. And it's relatively aggressive. Something I do here is, I never have it, usually it opens up here, pinned at the top. I bend it a little bit just so you don't get any clicks. So I'm gonna put this LFO tool at the end though. So now what we've got is we've got the high-end bass is really out of the way. We'll actually shelve it up a little bit more. There we go. We're gonna just carve it a little bit more. But what I do is you can add delay on the top end now, right? One thing you want to be careful of though is you definitely want to make sure you shave off the low end of a delay, right? And I like to take Valhalla delay and set it into dual mode, and then turn 1 to dotted eighths or fourths, and 1 to eighth notes, and it just gives it a nice little rhythm. So here's with it, here's without it. Right? And then what'll really give it a little more space in the mix, we'll add a bit of auto pan. And auto pan, in this particular case, I mean, you can turn it way up and have it really hard left and right. But that's a bit aggressive, right? You don't need it to go too far left and right. But I do have a pretty aggressive rate on it because I like them to be pretty tight. I don't want to go too much. So now we have this panning top end and a dead center sub bass. And one thing about, I don't know if this is something you're aware of, but a really cool feature, what I always do with my bass and my kick, particularly with the very, very low end, where they are mono, you can add stereo information, but in this case, you know, I want this particular sub bass to be mono, is switching your low end to be, instead of being centered like this, but to split stereo. And then usually when it starts out, it's wide like this, but having them a dead center, well, it'll take your left and right channels and sum them. You'll gain a little amplitude, but you'll just need to drop it back a little bit. But then you're sure that you're mono compatible, right? And you'll notice on the kick, I did the same thing here. Just like that. So now we have a nice low end relationship, right? There's a lot of space for the kick. That bass line is sort of panning around the space. So we are getting closer to all right, so that's the low end. Next chapter, we'll talk about percussion and hats and how to actually have them while they're not in the same frequency space. We can still have them add tension and still create space in the mix so that your mids have room to breathe and your highs are really clear, but that you create a little more movement in your mix. So we'll do that next.